All right, this is 11-1, statistical questions and variables. The vocabulary, kids, you got to memorize it. You got no choice but to memorize it. Categorical variable, also called a qualitative variable. I need to remove this in my notes before I print them off, which is a label or a type. It could be something as colors, you know, colors of a person's eyes. That's a categorical variable. Favorite sport, those are categories. A parameter is a population characteristic, which means it's a statistic, and that's what we're getting into, statistics. But a parameter is a population characteristic. And kids have the hardest time with these, but both parameter and population start with a P. Population is an entire group, okay? Could be the every student in Dresden High School or every teacher in Dresden High School. That would be the population of those groups. Quantitative means numbers. We call it, it's a countable thing we think about numbers. A sample is a small group of a population. A statistic is a characteristic of a sample. Statistic and sample start with an S of a population. And a statistical question is simply a question with varied answers. It might be like, what is your favorite color? If I ask a group of people what their favorite color is, I would expect different answers as opposed to just asking one person. All right. State questioned some of the high schools about the prices they were charging for prom tickets. The results are summarized in the histogram. So I learned apparently that histograms are no longer taught. Now, this happened, I started noticing this a couple years ago. This is a frequency distribution table, is what it is. It's called a histogram. And if I kind of look over here, there are 4 schools that charge between $25 and $29.99. There are 4 between 30 and 35, and so forth. Looks like maybe 6 between 35 and 39.99. So what questions can be answered in this datagram? Well, lots of questions. What we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out what schools charge for prom tickets. That's the big questions. What are other schools charging for prom tickets? Of course, we have nothing to do with prom at DHS. That's student led. That's parent thing. Who might be interested in these answers? Other schools. Are they selling tickets too cheap? Or are their schools too expensive? Anastasia is surprised the median cost of a prom ticket is not higher. You may not remember what median is. Median is the number in the middle. It's not the average, it's the number in the middle, but that the median cost of a prom ticket is not higher, given that her school is charging $60 per tickets. What are some reasons the data not conforming to her expectations? Well, I can tell you this, that these kids down here where their schools are only charging between 25 and 30 bucks, lots of things could happen. They could have very good fundraisers that are paying for the vast majority of it. If it's anything like Dresden High School, parents are contributing money where ticket costs just cover the extra. But most likely, those are poor regions and they're not spending money on prom like some of the nicer regions are. The most likely thing that occurs to me is she lives in a wealthy area. Other schools selected cheaper venues. That's what occurs to me. All right, what kind of questions about quantities and relationships among quantities can be answered with statistics? So consider the following questions. We're deciding if they're statistical questions or not. In 1 month is your birthday. That is directed solely at you. That is not a statistical question. Only asking about you. Versus the second question, what month has the most birthdays of students at your school? This is going to have varied responses. Therefore, it is a statistical question. And that's basically the gist of it. All right, does each graph represent the answer to a statistical question? One of them, we have a scatter plot of various distances that kids travel to school. And you'll notice that we have various distances. We could use this to find the mean, which we will call X bar, which I'll have to draw the bar over it because I don't have the ability with this software to put a bar over things, at least not easily. or the median, or some other things like standard deviation, stuff like that. You can find mode, not a very often used one, and things like standard deviation, which we will get to. So there is lots of data here. That's the main thing, there's data. Versus the second one, which is the travel time at 20 miles an hour, and it shows a graph of the average speed. Well, this is not really answering a question. There literally is no question. It's showing you distance when you travel 20 miles per hour. There's nothing going on there. So this is definitely a graph that can represent answers to stats. This thing is just a math problem, though it is. Nothing more. It's like legit y equals mx plus b. All right, try it. Is the given question a statistical question? Which is the most popular art form? Photography, painting, sculpting, or drawing? That is definitely, that's going to have varied answers. And I want to also categorize this. This is categorical, also known as qualitative data. Okay. How many lithographs were created by the artist M.C. Escher? Well, most of you guys are just going to chat GPT this thing, right? This is just going to be one answer. Like, that's all it's going to be. There's no data to form conclusions from or answer deeper questions. Most kids are just going to chat GPT that thing. All right. What type of statistical variable is represented by the following question and corresponding chart? The question here is, what is your favorite Olympic sport? All right. So that's actually represented over here. Looks like 25% of some people like track and field, 25% like basketball, 20% like swimming, and 30% like gymnastics. This is all categorical data or qualitative data. So these are categorical or qualitative questions. And since we have varied questions or varied responses, this is definitely, spell that, statistics. Okay, it's 100% statistics. Now, let's see here, reading through here, statistical variable is a quantity or quality that can be measured or counted, and for which data are expected to differ from one observation to another. Two main types are categorical or quantitative. Quantitative meaning countable. The question above is going to be different Olympic sports is shown by this chart, and it falls into categories. So these are categorical variables. This is a categorical variable. That's the big thing, categorical. All right, what is the typical number of apps a teenager has on a phone? That is a countable number, and a number is quantitative, 100%. Quantity being the key word there. All right, so anyways, I'm not going to spend any more time on that. Easy peasy. All right, what is the statistical variable represented by each of the following questions, and is it categorical or quantitative? What breed of dog is most likely to be adopted from an animal shelter? Well, these are types of breeds. So if we talk about question A, we are talking about categorical or qualitative variables. The average number of students per activity participating in after-school activities at Jefferson High School, that is a number, that is countable number, that is quantitative data. Quantity. All right, local newspaper randomly selects 30 students from each grade level to participate in the survey to determine the opinions of students at the school. What is the relationship between the sophomore surveyed, all the students surveyed, and all the students at school? I got some keywords highlighted here. In statistics, a set of members of a group that you want to know something about is called a population. The group of all the students at the school is the population that the school newspaper is studying in their survey. A sample is a subset or a smaller grouping of those people being studied to answer the statistical questions about the population. Because it's a lot quicker to just ask 10 people a question as opposed to everybody a question. All right, so what's the question here? What is the relationship between the sophomores surveyed? So the sophomores are a subset of the population. And yeah, that answers the question. They're just a sample, nothing more. All right, distinguish between populations and samples. A polling organization randomly chose eligible voters in the state of Illinois to ask who they would vote for in an upcoming election for governor, to determine who will win the election. What are the sample and the population? So the sample is the eligible voters that participated in the survey. The population would be the eligible voters in the state of Illinois. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. All right, a city worker collects 5 vials of water from each of 10 randomly selected locations all over the city to test the level of bacteria in the city water supply. What is the sample? Well, his sample is simply 5 vials, nothing more. What is the population? Well, the population would be the city water supply, the entire city water supply. I think Dresden's got 3 wells that they use. So there might be a fourth one I'm thinking about. But they would just sample a couple of them every once in a while. They wouldn't sample all of them constantly. Wouldn't make sense. And there's lots of places they can drive samples from. All right, is each quantity a statistic or a parameter? Now remember, statistic starts with S. So if you see the word statistic, we think sample. If we see the word parameter, we think population. That's really all there is to it. A high school lunch has 3 lunch periods. In a randomly selected lunch period, 24% of students brought lunch from home. This is a sample. Sorry, let me say that this is a statistic, because they only surveyed 1 lunch period, which would be the sample, okay? At the end of its first year of business, the movie theater collected data on how well its concession stand operated that year. The theater used its total yearly concession sales. Total yearly, that means the population, everything was considered, and number of tickets sold to calculate that the mean amount, because they used every single bit of data. We were talking about a population. So what they discovered is called a parameter, because it applies to all of it, not just a little bit of it. They didn't just pick on Fridays, okay? They picked on every single thing. And that might be it. There might be one more. That is it. Is the given data a parameter or a statistics? 53.2% of a district's eligible voters voted for the sitting U.S. representative. That is a parameter. It describes the entire population. The median age of a car in 20 randomly selected spaces in the school parking lot is 7 years. This is a sample because it only talked about 20 of the population, which would be every parking space. Okay, so that's a sample. And a sample means that we are a statistic, right? And that's really all there is to it. 11.1's pretty easy. I think there's about 6 days of instruction on Unit 11. Of course, obviously it gets harder, obviously.